we've just addressed in the last couple of months, and typically, well, it meets as needed, typically 1 to 2 times a year in December, January timeframe. Review the results of the external audit done by a certified public accounting firm. We take a look at those results. We make recommendations to the board, and we review the Form 990 prior to its filing, and review controls, financial controls, record keeping, conflict of interest, and we get input on appropriateness of executive director compensation. And I will mention that we have been resourced heavily since I joined the audit committee as the chair in 2011 by a person who has been on this for a longer period of time, John Reiner. So I want to give special thanks to John. That is, I think, a brief description of the audit committee, how we're made, and what we do. Over to so we'll start getting into some of the questions that have been asked. Sure.
Okay. How long? The first question: how long has the endowment been with current advisor, which is Neuberger Berman, and why did we switch this advisor? Barclays in July 2009, because one of our assets that they were measuring got tied up in prolonged litigation, stem the Lehman collapse. And other committee members took kind of a personal monitoring and meeting with the manager, et cetera, on that, something called Liberty View. I'm happy to say we got, so far, been repaid 140% of our initial investment, although it took 2 years, so it's not exactly a 40% return. But the thing about that is to say that at one point early on, we were at 30% for our investment. The committee discussed it and told the board we didn't think we should take it. We didn't. And that just shows you, I think, the kind of working together and thinking through these kind of issues as they come up. So I'm happy to report that as a little success for us. But as far as why we went with Neuberger, recommendations from others who had been with Neuberger, and we kind of liked their approach. One firm I liked very much didn't want to have some investments that we already had. So, that kind of winnowing out. But I talked to 3 firms, and I continue to talk to further top firms, even not with them, and they're going to give me advice, hoping someday I'll go with them. So I get a lot of input. Okay. Next, what has been the return since using this advisor, and how does that compare to the S&P 500 and other advisors? First, I don't really compare some advisors because our portfolio is so unique to us. We have so much of that, so much of the other, and so I can't say, well, what would another advisor do with that amount of money and those different asset classes? What we do is compare them to their respective index, large, small cap, international, whatever their particular investment game is. How have we done? In 2010, that says checking withdrawal data. Didn't have complete withdrawal data, but it looks like it's about 12%, between 10 and 12%. That paper tells me at home here, versus the S&P 15, 2.8 versus 2.1 S&P, 10.2 versus 16 for the S&P 2013, the price 24.5, but the S&P was 32.4. And 2014, which is interesting, far November 5.5% versus 39 for the S&P. What about that is this: in June we were actually ahead of the S&P. August we were only like a point behind, and the oil drop of 40% hit, which any related oil stocks too. So since we had more proportion oil stocks in the S&P 500, it hurt us more. But we still believe in the long run that situation will straighten itself out. So they need drastic moves there. In fact, our biggest, our most successful is an oil-related firm called Racklin, which is a pipeline. They carry gas and oil through pipelines for a fee, but really oil companies, they're just fee companies. And that's why, as I say, we don't consider the S&P to be the main benchmark, but just the individual asset classes for each one of these. As far as our experience in Newburgh, has been very good. Them twice a year in person to go over all the portfolio, and asset classes, returns, all that stuff. Responsive for us. And I say, I've been in banking for 43 years. But, you know, they treat well because we only have a portfolio of a little over 10 million. It's about 11.4 now. And, you know, most firms, big firms, won't even take a portfolio less than 10. So for us being at the bottom of their accepted scale, we're getting good service from them. Next question, what fees are charged by Newburgh? The fees charged are really just an percent of assets. There are no transaction fees. These vary by asset classes, with equities being on average 3 or 4 equity classes, but on average about 1.3%, and fixed income about 0.4%. At this, we don't have any alternatives that we would fee quotes for you. How fees, what have been the fees charged? Absolutely, as percentage on an annual basis. I would note first that these are all in the 990 expense column. For the latest 990, which was 930.13, the total absolute dollar amount was a little over 92,000, and that worked out to about 0.87 basis points. And that's a little on the high side for us, but it reflects the fact that for the last year or more, we've been in the stock, so we have the higher fee on equities than it would heavily in bonds, for example. Prior expenses for the manager, 2012, there was 82,074 basis points. 2011, 84,078 basis points, and 2010, 83,075 basis points. You can see it generally is in the mid-70s range as far as basis points for fees, although latest year was up to 87 based on the higher stock proportion in the portfolio. Okay, what are the assets?
Stephen, may I ask you just 1 second? Would you mind just speaking a little bit more loudly?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was trying to go fast, I guess. Anyway. Okay, on the how are the assets being invested in terms of equities, bonds, it's international, et cetera. Compare these, well, this is fixed income at this point, November 30th, was 22%, domestic equities 59%, national equities 13%, and the funds that we're just about through with 5%, and then cash than 1%. Now, in those categories, of the domestic equities, for example, growth 13%, of value 20%, small cap 20%, and partnerships and hybrid income type equities 42%. With national value, which is like European companies, that kind of thing, 51%, emerging markets 43%. What's happened to the financial records? Next question. Prior to 2006, by our retention policy, which we do annually by the board of directors, we keep different records for different length of time. We maintain 2 years to 7 years kind of record terms, and those each are maintained are kept permanently. We keep them all in hard copy or electronic form in the foundation office or in storage files in Rhinebeck now. This has been our protocol for the last several years, and I say I've got a ton of stuff at my house too. So those places get lost. I got a lot. I think that covers the admitted questions that were directly related to I think, Chuck, now you're going to pick up on the some of the expenses.
Thanks, Peter. What is the projected The first question is, what is the projected impact of building the new camp in Pennsylvania on endowment in 1, 2, and 3 years from now? And the primary motivation to consider a move from our current campsites is to consolidate operations at one campus in order to achieve cost savings. That is the biggest impact that we can have in terms of addressing our cost structure. Such a scenario, wherever it is located, offers savings in areas of facilities and duplication and staff duplication, for the shared kitchen, for food preparation, medical team, office facilities, and other staff support. And as we look at going from 2 sites to 1, the objective is to be able to accommodate 120 people, possibly more. As you consider property locations, we've learned moving to a property outside of New York will likely offer cost savings in several areas, including insurance, utilities, and staffing, as well as the costs of general food and services, bills, and so on. As example, we've been advised that were we to consider a property in Pennsylvania, operational cost savings might range 5 and 10% of annual camp operation budget, perhaps more. As cost savings, it's notable that in Pennsylvania, there are significantly fewer regulatory restrictions required, resulting in less staff time to ensure compliance, while maintaining a safe environment for campers. Additionally, the required counselor staffing ratios are significantly lower, and so fewer staff would be required. This could return our program to an all-camper to staff balance that resembles earlier 20 to 50 years at camp, rather than most recent 25. I was probably 20 to 50 years. Consolidating operations on one facility and perhaps into a state with lower regulatory burden without sacrificing a safe environment for campers could result in savings of $350,000 to $450,000 per 2-camp operation in New York State on an annual and ongoing basis. How this possibility impacts the endowment, I'd like you to take a look at this, if you can see it. Refer to sensitivity analysis charts. As I look at this chart, as I put it together, it means a lot to me, and we could probably spend an hour on this chart alone going over the different sensitivities that have been examined. The biggest improvement is really going from, if you take a look at this, along the x-axis at the bottom, you see 2 camp scenarios of R, H, and C, which is Red Hook and Clinton. You see Red Hook as a single site, and New as a single location. And we've tested those sensitivities for overhead reduction, capital and deferred maintenance, and level of annual fund. And you can see that in the Red Hook and Clinton 2 location scenario, in each of the sensitivities, there is a significant gap in terms of what we would expect the 2024 endowment balance to be. I should have said that in the beginning. This chart shows the relative impact on the estimated LAJF 2024 endowment balance. It assumes total campaign net proceeds of approximately $2.5 million in each case, and sensitivity for 120 campers for 7 weeks. It tests sensitivity around overhead cost reduction, capital and deferred maintenance estimate, and level of annual fund. This improvement comes from 2 locations to 1. And then the challenge or the choices are what is going to be, and the thing that we have had and that we have been looking at for the past year is a function of investment required to be able to accommodate 120 at one site, and then operating costs. I'll move on. Questions around related to expenses that were received. What is the salary of the executive director and how is the compensation determined and reviewed? The executive director is included as a specific line item in the CRS Form 90 that is filed each year. It's publicly available for view. The most recent IRS Form 990 was filed for the fiscal year ending 2013, which ended on September 30th, 2013. Following review by Finance and Investment Committee, Audit Committee, Independent Auditor, the compensation for Executive Director Judy Fox of $193,000. The most recent concluded fiscal year for 2014 covers the period ending September 30th, 2014, and the IRS filing hasn't been fully prepared or audited. Or anticipated filing. The compensation for the Executive Director, Richard Enemark, was reported as approximately $173,000. This reduction of about 10% from the previous Executive Director's compensation level. The salary of the Executive Director is determined and reviewed by the Board of Directors at least annually. The Board reviews the job performance of the Executive Director and also reviews the compensation level. The compensation review process includes a comparative review of other executive salaries, this being with LAJF's governance policies as well as standard nonprofit practice. As part of the discussion that we have as part of the Audit Committee review here with our external auditor. So the Executive Director's compensation at this time is fair and in keeping with both the work of the Foundation and standards applied in the nonprofit sector. Action and salary will be requested at this time of the Executive Director or any Foundation staff member. Second question is, if the Executive Director continues to reside in California, who pays his weekly airfare at the LAJL office in New York City, as well as his expenses for lodging and meals while he is in New York? Expenses amount to annually. It's a myth that the Executive Director resides in California. He maintains at his own expense an apartment in New York City. He also maintains a family home in California, the state where his daughter and other family members reside. His New York apartment, the Executive Director walks to work daily, incurring no expense for the Foundation. During spent in California, the Executive Director regularly meets with alumni and conducts work on behalf of the Foundation. The Foundation has not paid any sum towards his airfare, lodging, or other expenses incurred while at his family home. The next question is, does Christina Busso still reside in New York City? Still reside in Washington, D.C.? Does the LAJF continue to pay her travel, lodging, and meals when she goes to work in New York City? Christina Busso joined LAJF in a full-time professional capacity in March 2005 and has since before resided with her family in Alexandria, Virginia. For nearly 10 years of employment, Christina has traveled at the discretion of the Executive Directors Herb Klein, Judy Fox, Richard Enemark, including trips to the LAJF offices in Rhinebeck, Doylestown, and New York City, as well as CRS campuses at Red Hook, Clinton, and Stendhal, and locations in order to meet with alumni and supporters of LAJF. Because of my community and office location, New York City, her most frequently traveled to location. She's native of New York City, and during her trips to New York, she does not incur lodging expenses, opting to impose on various members of her family in order to limit costs to the Foundation. The question I'll read is, how much money and time will it take to bring the current campuses to standard, good or otherwise? This seems to be the greatest disagreement and clarity of the alumni community. When the board contemplated this question over the past year, we based our understanding on architectural plans that were drafted as part of the Red Hook project for renovation and construction from 2007, as well as from updated information from our facilities managers and pre-construction project costs at camp. For Red Hook and Clinton, we estimated between $2 and $6 million in capital improvement projects to include some renovation and repair, as well as some new construction. In the greatest amount of disagreement and uncertainty, the board has already announced a thoroughgoing facility review and needs assessment. Under the leadership of Tom Fudge, attended CRS in 75 to 77, the Buildings and Grounds Committee growing its membership and will be undertaking a thorough review of the current state of our properties. The committee will develop a framework for the needs of our program that can be used in evaluating and our current facilities and other potential program sites with a benchmark standard of needs. In developing that framework for our program, that framework is going to be developed with input from other committees as well, including but not limited to Program Committee, as well as Health and Safety. The needs will include a review of local zoning and building requirements, as well as guidelines established by national organizations, such as the American Camping Association. It's stated that from this needs assessment, a theoretical renovation and construction plan could be developed with cost estimates. And that's both 60 camper accommodation as well as 120 camper accommodation. The next would be the yearly expenses at the current locations. It seems annual operating expenses and ongoing capital expenses must be considered together in order to arrive at a comprehensive financial framework for sustainability. But first, to address the question of annual operating expenses, expenses of running 2 camps for the 2014 season totaled approximately $1.7 million. This is a reduction from expenses in the previous year. The board and executive director have already put in place cost-cutting measures that will reduce expenses moving forward, whether at our current campus locations or at a new location. The next question is, what has been the breakdown of expenses, including program overhead? That's proportion been in line with benchmark for similar efficient charities. Improvements can or need to be made. How would the board propose to do so? There are 2 areas that are considered program areas: camp operations and alumni affairs. The following of expense items includes both those program areas, as well as other expense areas, management and administration, and fundraising. It is identical to the information that is reported in our IRS Form 990 annual filings. Yes, thank you. This is for the past 5 years. Making the 9, we did have camp in 2009. That season was canceled because of our financial situation. And I might also add that in 2008, not only was the season wasn't canceled, but it was significantly scaled back. I was on the visit team. The breakdown of expenses compares with other nonprofits. Benchmarking is somewhat difficult to do, reflect a wide range of factors for each charity. That said, LAJF remains within the wide spectrum of expense allocations for nonprofits. One charity rating organization, CharityWatch.com, said at least 60% of expense should go to programs and 40% to everything else. Ranked highest from Charity Watch spend 25% or less on overhead. Another, the Better Business Bureau advises nonprofits spend more than 35% on administrative expenses, operating expenses. As from the chart, over the past 5 years, LAJF has spent between 18 and 31% on non-program expenses. Next, that's been raised. Will there be any joint programming for the boys and girls that might be cost effective? For example, a co-ed theater production might require one drama counselor instead of two, or one counselor could direct music programs for both camps, individually or jointly. That's why the current model of two single-gender programs is proposed without question. The answer to that is there are a great many options that the board would certainly consider in an effort to enrich the camp program while also offering some for cost savings. The apparent areas of cost savings so far have been estimates related to sharing staffing in the kitchen, medical team, waterfront, lifeguarding, and senior director level staff. The board is open to considering options. At this time, we have expressed a preference for single-gender educational program. The question that's been raised is, I understand the global cost of the camp is around $1 million a year. Our executive director has a salary of $172,000. How can run with the executive director salary being of 15.2% of total cost? Of mission, including all aspects of camp management, was approximately $1.7 million in 2014. Covering the period in January, ending September 2014. Same period, the executive director's compensation was approximately $173,000, or about 10% of total cost of operations. For an outfit of our operational size, executive around 10% is within the average of the region and the sector.
Sean, I just want to make one comment on that. I get that folks see big numbers, and there's some concern about that. One of the things that the foundation does on a regular basis is to look at professional studies that are done of nonprofits in the region, in the educational environment. And we look at those, and when the salary survey results come back, we're finding ourselves in about that appropriate range. And in fact, Richard came to us with a ton of experience, both in education and development, and it's an investment in a person who happens to be very good at doing his job, and that's why we look at that. So we do look at salaries. There's a follow-up question from Shana about looking at other regions. And Shana, one of the big differences is that the salaries flow a little bit differently by region. Really, it comes from the level of experience that you're looking for in a particular person. Thank you for entertaining my interruption, Chuck.
That's fine. Thanks a lot, Damian. And it follows also the salary levels of the prior executive director, Judy Fox, who brought some type of experience and what we felt we needed to be able to continue to grow to continue to preserve, sustain, and grow Camp Horizon, which is the core program. Okay, next question is, a number of alumni have inquired about foundation expenses, including an historic look at expenses. The following is a review of the expenses as Form 990, which is filed annually and publicly available. These are available for review from a number of public sources, but we are making them available by this link, which is, as you can read it there if you are seeing the chart. If not, it's www.tinyurl.com/LAJF990S. And here, I'm not sure if we're going to, the next chart basically shows what the expenses are each year. Oh, there it is. Each year from 2000 to 2014. The 2014 is projected since it's not yet audited. This inflation calculator, these CRS 990 filing details reveal that between 2000 and 2014, operational expenses increased at an overall rate that is consistent with inflation. The administrative costs or overhead be reduced. The board is expenditures for operations and working with the executive director. Expenses and working with the executive director, expenses are being cut. The New York City-based staff has been reduced from 6 to 4. We have continued to consider costs of operations in New York City versus other location alternatives. But keep in mind, as exhibited in our audited IRS Form 990 reporting expenses from a year ending September 2013, this expense is less than 3% of the budget. Programs for camp and alumni are 74% and fundraising 8%. For the fiscal year that concluded on September 30th, 2014, financial statements and audit have not yet been finalized. We're in the process of doing that now. It's estimated that we'll report total expenses between and the previous fiscal year, with most savings coming from management and administration. For the year ahead, those costs will be further reduced. As a matter, the foundation moved its office locations from Doylestown, Pennsylvania to New York City. All pertinent and required documentation was properly filed with the state regulatory agencies. Do we open this up for questions now, or do we want to move ahead and
We've been monitoring questions along the way, and one of the ones that came up, Chuck, related to the section we just covered, question of the renovation expense, and that was from Eugene Podoshkik. He was asking, do the capital improvements need to be done all in 1 year, or can they be amortized over several years?
They have gone through the outstanding. Let me start with our assumptions as we've gone through taking various ways to operate, is that capital improvements would be made over a number of years, not all at once. So all of that sensitivity analysis chart that I showed earlier shows that that improvements would be made over the space of something like 5 to 6 to 7 years, not all at once. I don't know if that answers your question. And I think I would rely on recommendations coming out of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, the effort that Tom Spurge is looking at in terms of what that type of sequencing needs to be going forward. But that shares what our assumptions have been.
Follow-up question from Pete Kumas. If there was no camp season in 2009, why was the operating expense so high?
I have to rely on someone that was perhaps around back in 2009. If anybody else would like to take a shot at that, otherwise I will do best.
I would point out that there are at the time with 2 camps, you have 2 full-time caregivers. All the costs of maintaining the properties, you still have to treat the pool, you still have to mow the lawns and do that kind of work. So as long as you own 2 facilities, you have that base cost of just maintaining them, and that comes out to be well over $200,000 a year just for that maintenance cost. You have staff. We also held, as a matter of fact, Chuck, that's where I met you, was at a summer retreat that year when we brought in all those groups of alumni who came up to the camp, and we engaged in long workshops over several days to talk about Rising Sun, about the future, fundraising operations and such. So that was a portion of it. And we hired a new executive director, Judy Fox. There was the search firm fees to hire her, and so on. So those were some of the bigger items that year.
Okay. No questions. We can move ahead. This is Peter's question. The Foundation's next question is, the Foundation's independent auditor a year ago recommended that the Foundation's reliance on its endowment to support operation is fiscally unhealthy, and that the Foundation identify ways to increase revenue from other sources. How has the auditor's recommendation. And the full text from the audit report reads, the foundation has depended on investment performance to support operations in recent years. This is difficult to sustain over the longer term for any organization. Use of the investment return for operations limits the endowment's ability to not only grow, but also to keep up with inflation and preserve the value of the endowment over time. And to identify ways to increase revenue from other investment sources in order to preserve the endowment for future years. I'd also like to read the recommendation that the audit committee made after viewing that auditor recommendation, and this has been shared on and acted on by the board going forward. Long-term strategy and budget that gets LAJF on a path to stronger and more secure financial future was the recommendation in the audit committee as a result of its review last year. While the auditor has pointed out in no investment in alternative revenue streams that current strategies rely heavily on investment income for growth, which may not be sustainable into the future, he believes that this fact alone jeopardizes the existence and perpetuity of the organization, and action should be taken immediately to address this. Much surrounded the best way to instill a sense of urgency in the board around this topic. So this text serves as the clearest way to express our great concern. While to offer suggestions on how this situation can be mitigated, we are hopeful that the Finance and Executive Committee can promptly begin discussions which lead to a long-term strategy and budget that gets us on a path to a stronger and more secure financial future. The ability is probably likely to be some combination of how the foundation addresses revenue in terms of income from endowment, fundraising, grants, fees, etc., costs, endowment capital. When asked for examples of revenue streams utilized by other nonprofit organizations, the auditor suggested a range of possibilities, including fee-for-service, foundation grants, as well as considering some form of tuition. That was made by the audit committee to the board and the executive committee and Finance and Investment Committee in January of this year. Go back to answering that first question. I just wanted to throw that in there, and the board, through its audit committee's consultation, noted this recommendation from last year and has been attentive to comment as one of the drivers of the board's thoroughgoing review of the comprehensive financial picture, including future projections. The focus for the board has been to seek to grow fundraising results. The question. Discuss the current fundraising process as well as the percentage of alumni and non-alumni donors. Fundraising efforts include year-round combination of efforts, include segmented and targeted appeals to alumni and non-alumni donors. We have had the benefit of expert counsel and advice over the past several years, and all conclude that our alumni are and will remain our most important donors. This is critical to the success of any future capital campaign, which can only be undertaken once we settle the direction of Rising Sun's future.
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I talk about the next couple of points?
Please.
Thanks. So the main contact that everyone's familiar with is the fall appeal. That's delivered through a combination of mailed and email messages and some targeted phone calls. So you would have received all the folks in this call hopefully have received an email within the last month as part of the fall 2014 appeal. So that's usually called a general fund. We also have the spring appeal, and this is a chance to go back to folks. You get a certain percentage of people who say yes and or respond to letters, and this is another chance in the spring where we focus on a particular camp need, whether that's camp travel, pool repair, tent platforms, and purchases, and it's another chance to go around the folks. Planned giving is a separate type of campaign, and it's an extremely important part for most nonprofit organizations on a long-term basis, and that's something that we started in 2008. It's called Freddie Jonas Legacy Society. we've got 30 people, alumni, which is a modest start, but we have 30 alumni who have essentially added Rising Sun into their wills as a form of plan giving or use some other vehicle for plan giving. And that's something that received a lot of support from the professional staff, allowed us to finally start a plan giving program where we had some problems getting that off the ground in the past. Certain scholarship endowments. So there are some very specific endowed scholarships created by some alumni, as well as some friends and family of alumni. You've got a fund that Bob Gittleman started, the Gittleman Fund for the Arts. There's a fund for Minnesota campers. There's a Rising Sun Scholarship in memory of Bob Mellons. There's a Masia Family Scholarship in honor of Libby and Mandy Masia. And you have the Pavel Histrov Memorial Scholarship that funds scholarships for some Eastern Europe. There are also some let's say, camp-specific scholarships that cover things like the Alumni College Scholarship Program and others, but those aren't directly at the Rising Sun operational. There have been some peer-to-peer fundraising initiatives. We've had some of our alumni go out and start social networking campaigns or reaching out to their fellow campers to mark special birthdays, marathon endeavors. One of our board members recently completed the New York Marathon and raised, I believe, $10,000, or other big milestones in people's lives. Through a partnership with an innovative young company, we're able to provide very cost-effective and easy-to-use technology for that purpose. So we have worked in this area of peer-to-peer fundraising. Reunions, there are some special campaigns around specific reunion milestones, 15 years, campaigns, and so on. Let me see if I have any specific notes on that. Coincide with the spring appeal. So when we reach out to alumni in the spring, we also talk about some of these annual campaigns, and a lot of our alumni have stepped up and helped with those. So, for example, Joseph Riddle did one for his 25th anniversary a year and a half ago, and he was able to raise, I believe, $25,000 for that. You have foundation and corporate support. It's an ongoing fact that we seek opportunities in this area. To date, the areas where we've been most successful in generating recurring and increasing giving from non-alumni has been in relation to employer matching grants. So there are some small nominal amounts that we've received from foundations, but what all of the pros tell us in this particular area is that as the program we're not like the Red Cross, we're not like United Way, we're not going to be able to raise a ton of money from outside organizations. We're going to be relying on alumni today, we are relying on them today, and we're going to be relying on them for the next 30, 40, 50 years in order to drive home the financing and, for camp operations. We have a major donor outreach program. Something that we've been putting a lot of effort into over the last several years. And we've able to put effort into it because we have professional staff now who are able to focus on doing this. And that committee aims to develop a wider and deeper network of major donors. And major donors, we're talking about folks who are able to give in amounts exceeding $100,000 a year. And that's I got additional information here. Here's an overview of contributions received over a year period, going back from 2009 up through 2013. And I think what I want folks to understand looking at this really in particular is that in 2011, it was an extraordinary year. We received one-time extraordinary gifts from three sources, one of them being Bob Mellons, who passed away, as well as Libby Masia, and also had some major capital campaigns going on that year for very specific repairs, and as a result, we received a lot of extra money as a result of that sort of giving.
When you're talking about reunions, you mentioned the effort that Riddle had 2 years ago, and this past year, Tony Bonilla had a 40 for 40 reunion milestone, which was made a difference.
Absolutely. So this is an explanation of giving by category, and you can see a broad stroke of where the numbers are. The alumni contributions continue to be the majority of contributions. You've got a certain amount of friends of Louis August Jonas Foundation, and by friends that means our vendors in a lot of cases. Foundations and corporations have been relatively modest amounts, and again, where people give in those areas, it's usually employee or matching grants for employees in the U.S. Parents and family, we approach parents of campers after the summer is over. That usually results in some modest one-time gifts from parents, and then you have some other smaller gifts in some other areas. Okay, and that's just showing it in a nice chart. Okay, and then another question that was asked by Henry Bierman. What is the biggest challenge from a fundraising standpoint? One, our great challenge has been achieving the speed of growth in the base of alumni support, both in terms of the number of alumni donors and the size of alumni gifts. So over the last 10 years, or longer in fact, we've been working to shift the culture among our alumni to establish Rising Sun as a philanthropic priority amongst them. Think about it, when I finished camp in 1987 and I left, at that point the boys camp, the endowment was kicking off enough extra money every year to build a pool, to build a tennis court, to do all these new projects. We haven't had that luxury since 1988. But when we left in 1987, we were told, well, we don't really need a lot to come back and give money. And campers for decades were told that. The reality is very different today. So you're also overcoming many decades of alumni being told that their financial support wasn't needed. Compare that with, let's say, Williams or Yale or Harvard State, and before you graduate, they're trying to inculcate lifelong giving into you. And that's one of the things that as an organization we've been working very hard to overcome, is to build up that number of alumni who look at Rising Sun as a priority, who are willing to make contributions, and put us on the list with the other nonprofits that they donate to. In my wife's case and I, this is a conversation we have around this time every year. Which organizations do we prioritize in our giving? And that's an important point for us. And actually growing the size of alumni gifts, that's important. What we do need to work on, we've got a lot of gifts in the under $100 range and maybe $100 to $200. And to move up that fundraising pyramid, we should be able to do better at raising money from larger contributors, people who can make 6- or 7-figure contributions to the organization. Quickly, I apologize. I've been accused of that many times in my play. So, I submitted, in fact, quite a few questions on fundraising. This one also from him. I believe alumni fundraising efforts could be improved if a targeted fundraising goal was dictated in campaigns. What is that fundraising goal? So for the past 2 years, we've been talking about raising annual alumni giving up to $1 million. And we would really need to be in order to sustain long-term the Rising Sun mission. So I would take a lot of pressure off the endowment. Of course, what the auditor suggested, we have to stop relying just on the endowment, because the endowment can only spin off $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year. And since 2001, we've been spending well over $1.2 million to run to bare bones camps, and inflation has adjusted each year since then. So we need to develop additional sources of funding, and that means, essentially fundraising. Visually, let me just throw up a chart here. Donate represented in dark blue, and earnings at 5.5 are represented in light blue. Additional funds drawn from the endowments are represented in dark pink. So, oops, I apologize. So a $1 million annual fund would provide much more stability for operating expenses, but not address any capital needs. So that would help you operate on a year-to-year, operate your camp. That $1 million wouldn't begin to eat into the capital expenses that we need to improve facilities, but at least that kind of increase in the annual campaign would allow us to have a smoother operational budget on an annual basis. This question comes from Sarah Utterman-Merritt. If the LAJF were to hire more staff dedicated to fundraising, how would fundraising capacity scale? The short answer is more of everything. Our staff has frequently noted that there is no shortage of ideas. One is a shortage of hands to actually do the work. And one shameless plug to them is the success we've had growing fundraising from $100,000, $120,000 6 or 7 years ago. That was our annual campaign. Today, we're consistently over $500,000, and that is because of the work done by the staff. The stepping up now for our capital campaign, but the work to date has been done by staff and by volunteers, but it's been coordinated by a very professional and very hardworking staff we've had. So development offices at independent schools or other small nonprofits, development office is frequently comprised of 2 to 4 full-time staff members, in addition to at least 1 administrative professional. At the LAJF, development work is a responsibility that is shared by all 4 of our current staff members, but also have to handle alumni relations, communications, program management, and all the foundation operations. So in fact, Sarah, the answer to your question is if we had more staff, we would do more of the ideas that alumni bring to us on a regular basis. Ian Eisenberg asked a question about how many alumni donate a percentage. This is from the online chat. How does this compare with peer organizations? Our number last year was 11%. That is somewhere in the middle to low side of peer organizations. 20% would be an intermediate target for us. I don't disagree. I think we've gone from 5% to 11% in several years. 20% would be a great target, Ian, and I agree with you 100% on that. Okay. This is Feldman. I was a camper. My parents made a contribution which they could afford. It didn't cover the cost of my stay at CRS, but it was a gesture that was appreciated. Could a voluntary contribution be reinstated? Marty, the answer is yes. And in fact, the practice of requesting families of recent campers consider a contribution to support Rising Sun has been standard for us for many years. After camp's conclusion, parents are sent a letter along with a post-summer survey regarding their child's experience at camp. In some cases, local selectors also meet with the families before after camp and also mention this sort of voluntary contribution. And over the past several years, we've seen a slight increase in parent giving to just about $4,000 per year in aggregate. Additionally, we aim to steward parent donors so that their gifts may be recurrent rather than the one-time donations. And in fact, most of them right now are in fact just one-time donations. Any questions on fundraising coming up? From Eugene Podoshkik about not necessarily seeing how moving to PA will help CRS in terms of expense operations. And Eugene, this is one of the things that over the course of the last year, we've invested a lot of time and energy into looking at it. We're going to invest more time over the next 6 months to a year looking at it. But when we speak to people who run camps, and it's funny to think about professional camp organizers, but are out there, and they all tell the same thing. Moving out of New York, moving to a co-located model, doing these different things can result in very significant savings for foundations. And we're happy to address those questions more in detail offline if you would like to. I think going on to the big picture stuff, we're back to you.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of that 1 hour that we had scheduled. Will we be able to go over, Damian?
Be considerate of people's times. We'll go to extend this a little bit. If folks need to drop off, that's fine. But in the meantime, if folks can stand a little bit, and if you're able to, then yeah, we definitely have more time on the conference call.
Okay, next question. Thanks, Damian. Next question is from Henry Bierman. What does the board of directors hope to see in 5 years at Camp Rising Sun? It'll take smooth over this transition, but the board's priorities and aspirations should be reflected in this vision, and that's a great question. It seeks a solution for the finances of Rising Sun that assures it will have a life of generations to come, not to years. With time frame, the board aims for Camp Rising Sun to continue to serve both boys and girls of 120 campers each summer, program with preferred duration of 7 weeks for every camper, and operate facilities that accommodate current program needs, and foundation for 50 plus more years. In order to achieve these goals, maybe some tough decisions over the next 5 years. Think about our responsibility and who we serve. A large part of who we serve are future generations, and that's something that I think we try to be mindful of. Damian? You want to take?
Myself, I forgot I muted myself. What conditions will remain the same, and what's going to change? For example, at a single site, how much of it will be co-ed, and where will campers come from? This question came from Josh Thomas. Single site, where location, if anything of the traditions from camp would be expected to change. These rituals, camper diversity, etc. As to the question of coeducation, the board has the property site where boys and girls are residents of the same property. That's what co-location means. But where instructional activities and daily living take place separate from one another, and is not co-educational. In other words, instructions are for boys and have their separate instruction time. Projects the same way. They don't use the pool at the same time, and so on. And these are activities. So, it's not educational in that sense of the word. Since the question asked about the New York-centric component of camp, it may be worth noting that the camper body has become somewhat less New York-centric over the past decade. We now draw about 50 to 60% of the campers from outside the U.S., 20 to 25% from New York, and the remaining, let's say, 25% from around the U.S. Those numbers vary a little bit year. The range in terms of the percentages, 50 to 60, 25 to 30. There is some practical utility in having some larger number of campers in the New York City area. At the end of the day, what we've done is gone out and sought a more international group of campers, more diverse group of campers. But the intent from a co-ed versus a co-location point of view is that you try to you're minimizing the amount of time that the group's spending together, and it's a model that many camps throughout the United States run on today. Next question, have you quantified the feedback having in favor or opposed to selling the camps since the announcement and tried to estimate the actual loss to donations by proceeding? I find the attachment to the camp locations as compared to the program's admission rational, but I'm pragmatic enough to see that others disagree that the LAGF may find donations increased. A different version of that question is how many alumni are you prepared to lose from the next 100 years to impose this, what some folks call our grand vision over the course of time. That question came from Dave Howard and from JC. So let me break that into two parts. To address the first part of the first question, we have not conducted a comprehensive survey of all alumni in that exact manner, but here's what we've done. We conducted surveys at and after the World Reunion in Hungary in August 2014, as well as the New York City Summit in September 2014, also an Alumni Association online meeting in September 2014. So 3 days. We've got the survey data from those groups suggesting a real willingness among the alumni community to consider and endorse operational changes. Does that mean the location where such a change would result in a financial improvement and long-term sustainability for Rising Sun? So it's not that people just want to move camp for the sake of moving camp, but if it improves the financial performance or helps to guarantee our future and sustainability, then yes, folks are willing to consider that. Now, following the World Reunion, 50% of survey respondents indicated that they would even consider a shorter program of 4 weeks or tuition system if either of those offered financial benefit. In New York City, over 45% of respondents stated that if short-term changes were necessary, their top preference would be for a co-located camp facility for boys and girls with duration for 7 weeks. So we looked at a lot of different scenarios, and at the end of the day, that one got a lot of support from people. Additionally, though we don't pin the world on this number, it's notable that as we have been running our development reporting, we've been running well ahead of last year's fundraising efforts as of December 1st. In other words, alumni are kicking in their support. They understand the situation is dangerous to the organization, and they're stepping up to support. And in fact, as of December 1st, the annual fund mailing was just beginning to reach our alumni. Now, there are some donors who said that they intend to withhold support That's their prerogative, but it's notable that we have notable areas of success in the current fiscal year that started October 1st. For example, we have 41 new donors representing $14,000 in giving. Another 41 donors have increased their gift from last year. 22 of them have at least doubled their gift, which means $50,000 in additional giving. And we had 59 donors return to us who had not donated in the previous fiscal year and have now donated this year, 10 of whom gave $1,000 or more, another $24,000 in total giving. So there have been some successes. I don't blame people for where to allocate their donations, but we have had a lot of alumni come back in support of what we've been doing. In addition, our discussions with at least one major donor capable of giving a gift of $1 million or more leads us to expect that donor will only give at such a generous level the new Dawn plan succeeds. In other words, they want to know that we have a sustainable operating model going forward before they're willing to make a contribution of that size. As with respect to future planning, the board is not seeking to adopt changes in order to alienate some number of the alumni from the community. The board is rather committed to providing for the future of Rising Sun in perpetuity. 1987, when I was a camper, I was a smart-ass kid from Brooklyn who thought probably highly of himself, and Rising Sun gave me all sorts of experiences that I could have never achieved anywhere else. I'm personally committed to make sure that another smart-ass kid from Brooklyn or Utah or California or India 50 years now get to have the same opportunity that I had to Rising Sun in 1987. That's mine, and Pete, you were up for the next question.
Yeah, I have a great question, and I feel very happy to handle it. If sale of Red Hook is suspended for 6 months, pending further study, why is the board instructing the executive director to act to search for another property? Does JF intend to own 3 properties? Comus. Well, no. The answer is my favorite. The board does not intend to own and operate 3 properties. Rather, in order to reduce costs and bring them down back to financial health, the board will need to consolidate CRS operations to a single campus. Okay. In response to strong feelings expressed by alumni, the board is putting the sale of Red Hook on hold indefinitely. The Energized Building and Grounds Committee will reassess the viability of retrofitting both Red and Clinton as a site for both camps. We'll continue to evaluate additional sites in other locations to give us comparison data for a decision. So the executive director will continue to look, but time, the assessment, a reassessment is a point, and therefore the sale, if you will, is not put off for 6 months; it's put off indefinitely. We have ducks, we think, right. Chuck?
Okay. Next question was raised by Oliver Collet from a group of French alumni. We see the values of CRS as diversity, friendship, leadership, compassion for others. We also place high priority on the CRS scholarship, no cost, a duration of at least 7 weeks, and operates at least at Red Hook. We are ready to accept to have only 1 camp for boys and 1 camp for girls alternatively every in the future rather than selling Red Hook and heading to Pennsylvania. On these bases, we have to keep only Red Hook with a 7-week program for boys and girls alternatively. Into consideration. The board has considered a model of alternating camp use for boys and girls and listened to alumni feedback from a variety of sources. Primarily surveys conducted following the World Reunion in Hungary, Truck City Summit in September, and Association online meeting in September. While total agreement reached, there were some areas where trends were the same between the groups of respondents. A large percentage of alumni preferred co-located or shortened camp seasons as compared with alternating camp years. That girls and boys would be residents on the same campsite, but engaged in program activities together, as Damian said. This is different than co-educational. 7% of alumni respondents agreed it would be important to preserve some elements of the camp's traditions and historic geography if a move from Rhinebeck would take place. And 30% of alumni respondents indicated it was either not at all or only somewhat important to keep the CRS program at Red Hook or at Clinton. A number felt the connection to the physical locations in Red Hook was very important. The board to this feedback and input is that based on alumni responses and mission of the foundation, the board committed to serving young men and young women on an annual basis and to maintaining program impact on a minimum of 120 campers annually. I'd say that's 120 campers annually and the possibility to be able to expand that sometime in the future. But that money is our core. And that's what we are seeking, to find a way to be able to provide that on a sustainable basis in perpetuity for future generations to come.
Yeah. So David Levine asked the follow-up question, what does preserving elements of historic geography mean? David, I think there's a sense on the part of some people in the alumni body that you have to have Rising Sun in Dutchess County, or specifically at the sites that were there. Some of this before, and I was a camper in 1987 when the girls' camp was purchased. And there were a lot of alumni at the time and some board members who felt that you didn't run a girls' camp at the facility because Freddie didn't buy it. It wasn't Freddie's chosen land, and it had worked for boys for so long, but there would be so many problems that wouldn't work for girls. And alumni now for more than 20 years have been proving that wrong. The same thing happened when Stennis was being opened. A lot of folks said, well, you can't run a camp in Denmark with rooms instead of tents and with a smaller group and so on and so forth. But again, the Stennis alumni proved that wrong. So matters, a beautiful facility matters. But what really matters are the people that you're with as campers, the great staff you recruit, the awesome program that we have, and a living environment that's unique and way more driven by the people than just about anything else, the people in the program. And when we look at why, to their question, why wouldn't we consider Red Hook, refurbishing Red Hook, we did consider that. And in fact, we're considering, again, we're working through the numbers, as Peter mentioned earlier. But at the end of the day, it's a very expensive proposition to refurbish Red Hook. And based on our understanding of the numbers, we can't afford to fix up Red Hook in the way that would be required to run a 120-person program. But I would encourage you to stay tuned. There's going to be more communication to alumni over the next several months to a year about what the elements would be. We're talking to alumni, keeping this conversation going on for the next several months to a year or longer, so that we can communicate to people, explain to them what the situation is, and making sure folks have a sense of what the numbers are, have a sense of what the program is, have an understanding of the different scenarios we've looked at. But again, going back to the New York City Summit, in the year before that, we considered 22 different scenarios: one camp, two camps, smaller camps, shorter camps, different locations for camps. The main goal, though, is to make sure that we have the financial resources that sustain the program and the mission of Rising Sun, even at a different place, but can for the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years forward. And that's really what our attention is, to make sure that people like us, except young kids now, 40, 50 years from now, have the same opportunity that we did as alumni of Rising Sun.
I'd like to add just a couple of comments. I know we're towards the end, but the board has been really struggling with this decision and these decisions over the course of the past year. And remember, on the board, we've gone through quite a roller coaster in terms of trying to figure out what is the right way to move ahead to get what Damian was just talking about. It hasn't been easy. And there's been a lot of argument, there's been a lot of debate, there's been all different types of reactions, very much different from some of the reactions that we're seeing in the alumni community now. And we've gone through this process. I think that, could we have communicated more sooner better, more often. That's hindsight. Perhaps we could have. We're doing everything we can now to have that communication going, so the alumni community can try to understand what are the different considerations that we've been wrestling with for the past year, and other boards have been wrestling with for the past 5 years or more, and get to a place where we can have that sustainable future. So I'd just like to offer those thoughts, and stay with us, please, and let's work this out.
Do you have any closing comments, or Peter, about any upcoming issues or events?
I would just add that, this is number one in terms of the halls called that, and we are going to have further meetings. I think there's one for January 7th, sit down with people. So, as I said, getting ready to go to the table, definite period. One for that is that we can have this further communication with people and the studies done and that sort of thing.
Just add, the open invitation to alumni to further engage in subsequent town hall meetings in the next reunion that is happening in New York City on January the 10th, a Saturday time event. We invite folks to engage with one another and be part of the alumni community, and that from my observations as a staff member, certainly I'm quite respectful and appreciative of the work that the board has done in the last year in order to confront the difficult decisions, and the staff is, as a whole, support of whatever we can do in whatever ways to support the alumni community and the camp community.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining the call. We appreciate your time and for sticking with us a little bit longer. And somehow or another, we managed to make our way through the complete list of questions. And again, we'll be posting some follow-up information on the site. Folks have asked for the slides and further information, and we'll be getting that out to not just the folks in this call, but the rest of the alumni community over the course of hopefully the next week or two, as soon as we can put it all together and package it. And thank you very much. From Pat O'Malley, our chair, is that one of the ways that people can be involved, and it's important for people to be involved, is join the committees. We have an awesome group of people who, like Gus Harakopoulos, who runs our program committee. We've got Peter on the finance side. We need the voices of alumni, and we need them in a structured format. Joining the committees is a great way to be involved directly in the governance of the foundation and the camps, and making sure that Horizon continues to be a strong, vibrant force going forward. And there's plenty of committees, and you can email alumni@lajf.org, and they'll be happy to put you in touch with the committee chairs and integrate folks into the process and bring new voices to the table. Thank you all very much, and have a great day.